In a hole in the ground, there lived a hobbit. Bilbo Baggins was a respected hobbit. He lived a comfortable life and never had any adventures.
Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings books are perhaps the best-known fantasy stories ever told. Under the fairy story genre, Tolkien actually set out guidelines of fictional rules for these stories that would eventually be published in an essay and accepted by other authors. But he did more than just establish the formula for these stories. He created an entire universe that was so deep and complex that it paved the way for countless games and movies to be used with it. Of course, while the main trilogy of movies have already been released, the prequel to the series is set to have the first half of its movie hit theaters at the end of the year. Interestingly enough, a video game based on the book, and not a movie, was released about 9 years ago. This is The Hobbit for the GameCube. The Hobbit's main character is Bilbo Baggins, a small hobbit who has never had adventure in his life, but is called upon by the wizard Gandalf to be the burglar in his party, along with 13 dwarves. After an interesting party at Bilbo's home, the group set off to recover treasure and defeat the evil dragon Smaug. Now, you obviously know all of that if you read the book already, which I highly recommend you do, but the game's narrative actually does feel more like a book than a movie. In between playable sections, text, sometimes directly from the book, is read by a narrator to introduce plot points. The game also keeps some of the humor from the book, although not entirely. As a more personal tale than The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit is actually pretty funny at times, and so is the game, but a little less so. As far as gameplay goes, The Hobbit is a pretty standard action-adventure game. Bilbo can jump, attack, solve some puzzles, and collect items to help him along the way. Now, the game also has some stealth elements to show how sneaky Bilbo Baggins and other hobbits were, but they are nowhere near as developed as full-fledged stealth titles. Bilbo also has a variety of weapons to get as you progress, such as his walking stick, a sword, and rocks, which Bilbo is extremely skilled at throwing against spiders. Choosing how to attack enemies is pretty important. Now, with that stuff being said, this is a very difficult game, which isn't a fault in itself, but it sometimes isn't for the right reasons. The footage you see is from fairly early in the game, but it gets tough quickly. Platforming is generally not an issue, but a very slight delay after you press the button can cause you to die if you then fall into a hazard. Combat is a little bit better, it's mostly about timing, and button mashing doesn't usually work, which is a good thing. The game also has you doing some fetch quests, presumably as filler because the actual book isn't all that long, and while they aren't necessarily bad, they don't feel like they really need to be there. The Hobbit is a very interesting game. It gets the feel and tone of the book perfectly, and really does feel like a playable version of the book, but the gameplay just doesn't really separate itself from other games in the genre. However, this is definitely a good game to play if you're looking forward to seeing the movie later this year.